Hi. Hi, how are you? Okay. So you can see me okay? Well, that's good. Sure. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, this is, okay, so let's start. My name is Robert Thompson. This is a bit bigger so I can. My name is Robert Thompson. I worked a long time ago at the Westray coal mine. I grew up in Plymouth, just up the road from where the mine was built. It's a long story, I guess. Not too long. I started working at Westray. I'm a lifelong resident of Plymouth, and my dad lived there too. I started working at Westray on May 15th or thereabouts, 1992, in the coal lab. I was a coal lab technician. My job there was to conduct tests on coal quality and various other things associated with production of coal. A little bit of background on my education. I went to St. FX. I graduated with Bachelor of Science in geology and did some chemistry and stuff like that. And that's how I ended up at the mine. So in the intervening weeks between when I got hired and May 9th, the explosion, I got my feet wet, and I guess I started figuring out the lay of the land. But I guess I should probably kind of get right into it. So on my first day, there's a lot of talk about since over the years, people talked about the conditions there of labor conditions as far as how the bosses treated the employees. And my first experience with that would have been my first day when I was walking into the lab through where everybody mustered to go underground. And Gerald Phillips, who was the mine manager at the time, was screaming like a lunatic at a miner who was complaining probably about safety conditions in the underground. And he basically kind of browbeat this guy in front of probably 20 or 30 people to get him to comply, I guess, or to get him back in line. Anyway, it was kind of shocking to see somebody treating another person like that. But anyway, that said, anyhow, that would have been in April, of course, when I first started. In the weeks leading up to the explosion, there was a lot of stuff going on there. It was kind of a weird. I wasn't sure about how how things were working or whether things were being done right, but I did my best to do a good job, and things never did seem right. So, no. My last shift before the explosion, I was working in the lab, and on May 5th, I'm trying to kind of on May 5th, Trevor Eagles, who was the ventilation engineer and in charge of coal dust monitoring in the on site underground, dropped off 4 coal dust samples for me to test, which I did on the evening of May 5th. The next morning, on May 6th, I reported the test to the back to Trevor Eagles by phone. At the time, I kind of suspected there was a problem with the tests. They were really low, really bad, really. But there was very explosive coal dust. I mean, anybody with. But I was so busy that day. There was a lot of things going on, a lot of things that were not right. But there was not enough time to really think about what was the implications of what I was involved with. So I ended the day. I spoke to a couple of my friends, Larry Bell and Robbie Doyle, just before I left to go home. It was the end of we worked 4 on, 4 off for shifts. And actually May 6th would have been an extra shift. I wasn't supposed to be working on May 6th. Odd fate, I guess. But on May 6th, I ended the shift speaking to Robbie and Larry, mostly to Larry, but I never mentioned anything about the day, the numbers, how bad they were. I just went home and kind of figured that it would be looked after, I guess. So I figured it was out of my hands. I was a junior lab tech anyway, so I figured it would be better just to. I trusted other people to do their jobs, I guess. And then the next time I thought about Westray would have been on the morning of May 9th, when my brother-in-law at the time phoned our house at about 6:30 in the morning, and he was wondering if I was home. So there was a lot of phone calls like that going on that morning. He got me on the phone, and he asked me about what I thought of the explosion and whether anybody was still alive. And I said they were all dead, which it turned out I was right. So I didn't really want to be, but I knew on the morning of May 9th that all the men were dead underground. I knew that. So for the following week, I spent my days going back and forth to the community center, which was right across the road from where I grew up. I actually went to the school for first 4 years of my schooling, and so I spent my days there, wandering back and forth from there. I never went to the fire hall because I never thought it was my place to be down there with the families. They were going through a terrible time, and I felt from the get-go that they were being lied to. It turns out they spent a lot of time in that week making it sound like there was a chance for somebody to be alive in that mine, but they had to know that there was no chance that anybody would be found alive. A couple years later, got a call from my friend Doug McLeod, who was he was a miner there. He was an underground miner. He worked with the RCMP in the aftermath, and they were doing their investigation, and he showed me the pictures from underground, the stuff that probably most people haven't seen, and it was just complete, utter devastation. There was no way that anybody could have survived that explosion. I've seen things, but anyway, I've been bothered by this for many years. I spent a long time not talking about it at all, figuring that was the best thing to do. My dad, a long time ago, told me that I would get a chance to have my say, but it didn't turn out and that way. Probably because my testimony at an inquiry would have been inconvenient for the government and for the Westray company, because they needed to push the timeline past the 6th to the end of the day in the 7th for reasons that were never even brought up at the inquiry. Trevor Eagles, who was the man that I dealt with these coal dust samples, testified on the last day that I was essentially lying about what I knew when he said that he didn't know about these coal dust tests until the end of the day on the 7th. A lot of people wonder why I'm so adamant about insisting on the importance of dates. The reason why the dates are so important is because Trevor Eagles was told on the 6th about these coal dust tests. Albert McLean, who was the mine inspector, was at the mine, ostensibly to conduct qualification for miners for underground. But I think, this is only I can't prove it, but I think that he was there to see what was going on with the mine and their coal dust plan. He had issued an order on April 29th to come up with a plan to do something about the coal dust. And obviously they never did anything about it. And Trevor Eagles should have told him. If he had told him, then something would have had to been done. It's odd because it turns out the Phillips and Perry were the ones that were charged with crimes of manslaughter. And the odd thing is that, and this is something most people don't know, is that those two men weren't even in the country on May 6th. They didn't come back to Nova Scotia until the end of the day on the 7th, which is probably why Trevor Eagles was insisting that he did not get the test results until the end of the day on the 7th. By doing that, he basically kind of passed along the responsibility for doing something about the coal dust underground onto those two men. That's not the end of it. On the 22nd of May, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. I apologize. I was called back to work There was a lot of stuff to do. We were trying to get called out the door. I didn't think it was right. There was still 11 men buried underground, and we were out trying to produce coal, which seemed to be not right to me. It just didn't seem. It just didn't seem right. At some point during the day, my supervisor was in the office. There was a bit of a kerfuffle. Gerald Phillips and Roger Perry and Trevor Eagles showed up in the lab, and it's a bit of an argument. And I was called over to the desk, and I was asked to go down to the lab to kind of walk them through the procedure I used to conduct the tests. At the end of that, I was basically I was there in the lab, and I went through the procedure, explained to them how I did it. There was an argument about water moisture in the coal dust and how that would, and Gerald Phillips was screaming at me like a crazy person, and which kind of unnerved me. I was kind of shocked. I was 26 years old, and as green as the grass as far as the mining industry, and to be screamed at like that. But he did leave after a while, and I kind of went on with my day, and somehow I put it aside, and that was on the 22nd. And on May 28th, I went to work for an evening shift, and I got to work. We worked 12-hour shifts, and got to work, and my boss, first thing I do, he tells me when I get to work is that he wants me to destroy the coal dust splits, the leftover part of the samples I tested on May 5th. I knew this was wrong, and I told him that there was no way I was going to decide what was going to be evidence or not in a investigation, if there was one. It's not up to me. I'm not the policeman or the prosecutor, so I told him there was no way I was going to do it. I told him in no uncertain terms that I didn't want to see anybody destroy the evidence. But at the end of the night, I finished my shift. I left the lab a little bit concerned about the safety of the coal dust test samples that were left. It was the only evidence of any of the conditions as far as the coal dust before the mine. Turns out later that Trevor Eagles did some more tests on the 8th, but he never did, for some reason, send them to the lab for testing. I still don't understand why the lack of urgency to get coal dust tests done by him or by Phillips or by anybody at Westray. It just seemed to be one of those things that they never thought was a very important thing. But anyhow, I left the lab and work on the morning of April 29th or May 29th, and decided to go to the police. I gave a statement with the RCMP. I must have triggered something, because by the time I got back to work that night, they had seized the mine, and it was in a complete lockdown. It didn't take them too long to figure out, or at some point I didn't really care either if they figured out it was me, because they went to the police, because I kind of figured that they would put 2 and 2 together and figure out that it was me that was doing the squealing or whistleblowing on what was going on there. So that night I decided, and I was concerned. I was concerned about the men underground. They were underground doing cleanup and actually trying to get the mine back somehow running, I guess. I'm not even sure what they were planning. Anyway, there were men working underground, and they did not have the information that I felt they needed to make an informed choice about whether they should be working, whether it was safe or not. So at that night, I decided to copy my test results. I posted them in the muster area in the where they went before they went underground, and I figured, and I did that. I knew that I was probably going to get fired for doing it. I was right, because a couple of weeks later I did get fired. I thought about, there was a lot of pressure on me at the time. I was like, there's a lot of, it's weird now when you think about it, but there was a lot of pressure on me and others to get that mine up and running again. It's hard to believe that now, thinking back on it, that people could actually want to consider reopening that mine, but it was the case then. So I was told by a lot of people to keep my mouth shut and let other people decide what to do. So I did that. So I spent the summer at home. My wife at the time got a job, and she went to work, and I stayed home and raised kids. In September of that year, Ches McDonald, who was the lead investigator for the Department of Labor, dropped by. He wanted me to go see him, but I couldn't. So he came to my house, and we had a long conversation. It took about an hour. At the end of the hour, he got up. He thanked me for my time, and he told me, he said, to keep this to yourself, but I don't trust the people I work for. So it was a powerful thing for somebody. I was 20, now 27, two small kids running around the house, and it kind of silenced me, quite honestly. I was shocked to hear somebody who was a former Mountie saying something like that to me. So he may not have intended for it to happen, but it did cause me to not want to talk about it too much. But my dad, he said that keep the faith, you'll get your chance, and you will be able to tell your story someday. I ended up on the witness list for the prosecution for the criminal trial, but that ended up getting stayed. In 1994, I think that's when it was. It kind of the trial fell apart. I think it was in '94. I'm not sure. I had to check my timeline for that, but and then they'll find out. All along there was this inquiry that was being promised. So I thought, well, okay, well maybe they'll call me for that. So and then the call never came. So and for many years I felt kind of left out, but in the last 4 or 5 years, I've come to realize it was probably a good thing that I wasn't asked to go there, because there was a lot of, how will I say it, misinformation, outright lies probably, So better to be not a part of something like that. I'm not faulting Justice Richards. I think he did a good job with the information he had to make conclusions. However, there was a lot of information that should have been brought to bear and for the public to see so that they can make an informed choice on their own. I could go on, I suppose, but I have learned a lot about this. I mean, I have been able to kind of, over the last 5 years, through talking about it, I can actually talk about it now. So, I mean, it was a mistake probably a long time ago to not talk about it. If I have any advice for young people or anybody, if they see injustice, I think that should be called out. Don't wait for some authority somewhere else to give you permission to tell your story. I wonder sometimes how things would be different the way it is now. Back then, there was no email, no cell phones, no texts. So you had to wait for a newspaper to find out what was going on that day. It would be. I wonder sometimes how this Westray thing would be different now, if it would be or if it would be not. Some days I wonder. So I could go on, but I'm not going to. If you guys have any questions, be more than willing to answer them. If you guys got any thoughts. Yeah, I guess that's about it, Tammy. Sorry, I'm not about it. I don't know how much. I guess I'll get you to call me now, Tammy. That's it. Hi. I'm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye.